I'm Tim Parsons. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Matchbox Virtual Media. We are a virtual event production company, and you are joining us for our inaugural session, webinar gathering in the Matchbox Kitchen space. And today we're going to be talking about conversational engagement, sort of exploring what it is and applying it to a very specific, very cool, very big name example that we had a lot of fun teaming up to give them a fantastic experience. Spoiler alert, the organization was Amazon, which was a lot of fun and, sort of outside of our traditional wheelhouse. And they came to us with a very interesting problem. So my job here is to sort of set up the context, sort of how we got here. And then Dave is going to walk us through how he and PropFuel bring the conversational engagement in general, and then sort of a little bit getting closer to the ground level on how it got applied here. And then Mishka from Matchbox, my colleague, will walk us through why and how she thought it was the right fit to bring to Amazon specifically, and then the role that PropFuel and the engagement played in providing a really cool event for the Amazon team.
Hey guys, I'm Dave Will. I am the co-founder of a company called PropFuel. It's a software company focused on trying to make communications a little more human, right? So trying to recreate that human interaction in the form of a conversation. And so we do that using this process called Ask, Capture, Act. We ask questions, capture input, and take action on it. It's all automated through email right now, and soon to be SMS or texting, and then soon to be on the website as well. So that's what PropFuel is all about.
Mishka, over to you. Tell us a little bit more about you, and maybe you want to do a little better job talking about Matchbox than I did.
So hi, everyone. My name is Mishka Rehak. I am our content and social media strategist, although I dip my toes in all sorts of different pieces of Matchbox. And much like Dave's goal with PropFuel and his intention, Matchbox's intention is to produce and spark conversations that matter, connections that last. So we produce events that don't just serve the purpose that they came in for, but exceed that purpose, and really make a community feel like they're a part of something and like their piece of the puzzle is super important, which is why a lot of Matchbox lines up super well with PropFuel. I'm also the head chef of this kitchen that you're in right now. So I figured I'd just go through what you may find in this event space while you're here. Right now, you're in our event session specific tab. So you're in a tile right now. Congratulations, you made it into the tile you're supposed to be in. If you exit this tile, you'll see that we have two other tiles sort of explaining what Matchbox does in more detail, as well as PropFuel. And if you go to the top of your screen, you can click down into different tabs where you'll find our main kitchen, which has a series of recipes, which are step-by-step guides for fun virtual experiences. And we actually have a recipe in collaboration with PropFuel called Alphabet Soup. Not Alphabet Soup, Registrant Soup. Alphabet Soup is the literal recipe. Our recipe is called Registrant Soup. So definitely make sure to check that out in the main kitchen tab. But I am head chef of this here kitchen. And I also help with some event design along the way.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mishka. So kind of touching on things that both of you said, it sort of gets us into the story, right? So we actually share a lot of values, I think, with PropFuel. Human connection is a big part of it, as are co-creating and perfecting and including. I keep having to look for the fourth one. But I think leaning into all of those is kind of what brings us together and what actually Amazon was looking for, right? So one of the fun sort of backstory to this story is that Matchbox, one of the key or sort of core strengths is how easy it is for us to integrate other technologies and to reach outside of our own toolbox to bring in sort of the best experience possible using whatever other tools we have available. And we have lots and lots of friends who do lots of cool things, right? So obviously including PropFuel. But we met Amazon by working with another tech partner of ours called CNET. And we did a whole event talking about sort of the way that you can better do social good storytelling. It was a storytelling summit. Amazon came to that event, really enjoyed their experience in the Matchbox space, reached out to us and wanted to know if we could help them with an event of theirs. So clearly, well, maybe not clearly, but I would say realistically, we are still not quite at a level where we could hold a virtual event for all of Amazon. So we did it for a small part of their team. Their talent acquisition team in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, I think the name says it all, is sort of spread out across a relatively large geographic area. And given the last year that we had with the pandemic, they're having a really hard time getting together and connecting in person. And again, because it was Amazon during the pandemic, they were incredibly busy. Like I'm sure many of you, we were ordering in as much as we could. We weren't doing very much shopping in person. So their demand went up. Their need for employees went up at the same time that it became harder and harder to sort of feel connected, even though that they are a huge organization. So Amazon wanted to, after about a year of operating in pandemic conditions across multiple countries in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, find a way to sort of slow down, take a breath, bring the team together and acknowledge the hard work that they did. But still, they weren't able to get together in person. So they wanted to find a way to get together online, but not just have it be sort of a bunch of faces on a screen talking to a bunch of people sitting at home. How can we make this interactive? How can we make this a co-created experience? How can we celebrate the hard work that we did? How can we include as many voices as possible? How can we innovate together? How can we build connections that will continue on after this event, out of this team day, this moment of celebration, this moment of coming together? And we worked with them for probably a good 2 to 3 months to come up with an event design that was a little bit big idea, a little bit small group discussion, and a lot of collaborative looking ahead. At the end of the day, we probably worked with 200 folks from the Amazon team coming together. And then we worked with PropFuel to help figure out, going into the event, how we could make it the best thing possible for 200 people who don't have a whole lot of time and attention to do long surveys, to participate in long focus groups. We wanted to give them sort of the easiest experience possible for celebrating and measure some things before the event and some things after the event. We wanted to invite them into the conversation from before the moment they showed up to well after the event ended. In the words of Priya Parker and her book, The Art of Gathering, we wanted to do a lot of priming and prepping. And it really felt like PropFuel, other than, in addition to being alliterative, priming, prepping, and PropFuel was also just the right tool for the job to get folks in the right headspace to show up feeling heard, with an understanding of what was going to happen and ready to participate from an informed place. So they weren't just kind of showing up wondering what to do next. So we did some table setting through some conversational engagement before, during, and after. And I think that was the right way to use conversational engagement, wasn't it, Dave? Please.
I think it was a good way. It was one of many ways. Conversational engagement is a huge theme. By the way, the word alliterative, I have not heard that since high school, I think. Well done. Actually using it in a sentence, right?
It's one of my key strengths is resurrecting old, rarely used words.
Right on, brother. Nice.
Thanks. So yeah, we'll throw it over to you now. If you wanted to dive in a little bit more on conversational engagement and take us from there, I will sit here and think of 3 more words that you haven't heard of in a long time to try and work.
It won't be hard. You touched on something early on in your conversation, or in your explanation of what we're doing here. You touched on something I think is super relevant to this big theme going on in the world right now, and that is using technology to create a more human experience, right? And that's super broad, but I'm seeing a lot of that right now, where you see tools that originally, I want to say like a decade ago, there were a lot of AI systems being used to just use machines to mimic people. And much like when you call Verizon or something on the phone, you get all these touch tone things, and it hasn't really worked well yet. And that's because it's really hard to truly mimic human behavior. But we're getting much closer to a marriage of actual humans and technology to make human interaction scalable. Right. So we're not just replacing humans with machines in this new wave, in this new theme. We're incorporating technology with humans to really be able to maximize that human interaction. That's what you guys are doing, virtual events. That's what we're doing with communication tools to create more human engagement through communication, called conversational engagement. And so that's the theme of what PropFuel is all about. It's about creating conversation. And Mishka mentioned that earlier, starting a conversation with people. And if you think about the way humans interact, so I'm still living up here in the clouds for a minute before I get into exactly like the interaction and how you use conversational engagement with conferences. I do want to talk about that, but I want to start with explaining what this thing is called conversational engagement. And I oftentimes use this as an example. So if you've ever seen me speak, you've probably heard this example, because I'm a lover. More specifically, I'm a dog lover. So I refer to dogs a lot. And I'm just going to explain in a very simple manner how, or metaphor. Tim, you got to tell me if there's a metaphor and an analogy, but I'm not sure which it is, so you're gonna have to help me out. But when I'm walking down the street and I see somebody walking their dog, my goal immediately is I want to pet that dog. I want to get some dog loving right there. And the way I do it is through conversation, right? You can't just run up and start petting somebody's dog. It's weird and dangerous. So I walk up to that person and I might say something like, "What a beautiful dog," or "What kind of dog is that?" It's like just something to spark usually a prompt, and it's usually not a question like I might have just said a second ago. Usually something like, "What a beautiful dog. Is your dog friendly? Or can I pet your dog?" Some really simple question, right? But it is going to prompt a response from that person. So I ask a question. Now I'm waiting to capture the response. And the response is going to be some form of a yes or no, which is going to lead to an action that is completely dependent on their answer. So it's going to be some version of a yes, dog loving, or some version of a no, respectfully back up. Right. So that's how the conversation goes. It's a conversation. That's how humans interact. You could apply that to seeing an old friend in a grocery store, or walking anywhere and bumping into somebody. Any business environment, cocktail party, or you walk into a room, or imagine if a new member were actually to walk into your office. And I'm talking from an association perspective right now. Imagine a new member walks into your office, the sign says, "I'm a new member to your association." Like, they're a new member. Well, what you would normally do is you'd be like, "Hey, I'm Dave. Welcome to the association. I'm so glad you're here. Like, why did you join? Like, tell me more about you. What are you looking to get out of?" I mean, you're going to ask any number of questions to spark a conversation, get their voice, get them talking to you. And then based on how they answer, you're probably going to go down that journey, down that path with them. Hey, why'd you join? Oh, well, I'm interested in getting more certified in my field. I think it's going to help me advance in my career. Oh, cool. Yeah. So we actually have 3 different certifications you might be interested in. Check them out. That's conversational engagement as it's applied to associations. Same mentality of me getting some dog loving from this dog walking down the street, right? So ask, capture, act. That's how humans interact. And that's what we're doing with the technology. It's a process of asking questions, capturing input, and taking action. Of course, the actions could be a million different possibilities through the technology. And many times, although that's all automated, many times that leads to real human interaction, like one-to-one human. It continues in this long tail, to continue my dog metaphor analogy. Do we know yet, is it an analogy or metaphor, what I was using there?
I haven't had a chance to sneak off and ask somebody smarter, but maybe Mishka knows.
She's dying to say something
in there. I think it's a metaphor, because an analogy would have direct ties. I think it's just my gut telling me metaphor.
So it's as like or as. Okay. Anyway.
If we're wrong, the people can tell us in the chat, and it'll be fun for us to be here and hear it.
I believe that's a simile when you use like or as. It's a metaphor when you use is or are.
This is us just being perfecting and human on camera, right? We're
I'm an entrepreneur. I didn't do so good in school. So anyway, so that's conversational engagement as a whole. That's the idea of ask, capture, act. That's a real life example, and it's a real life example of how associations are starting to interact with their members. Historically, the way associations would interact with a new member is they'd say, "Hey, welcome. Fill out your profile." That's really, really common in new member campaigns. Now, if you're really good, you're not going to quite do that. You might drip out a bunch of things that you're known for doing well. Problem is, you don't really know that that's of interest to the new member. You think, based on the pie chart that your survey told you last time, that 42% of your members like certifications, and so you're pretty good chance that one of the members or that somebody you're going to send this to is interested in that topic, maybe. But you're really not interested in listening what they have to say. You might hope they click on something. So that's the difference between what, generally speaking, exists now in new member campaigns versus the approach of a conversational engagement, which is an exchange, a two-way exchange. All right, so let's apply that to, and by the way, that's good for member acquisition. New member onboarding was the example I just gave. Profile building, ask a question like, hey, this is what we have for your title. Is that still accurate? Yes, no. Leads to, oh, then what's your new title? And that gets written back to a database. It's way better conversational approach to capturing profile data than just saying, hey, go fill out your profile, yo, which never works. Nobody ever does it. So member needs, ASAE is big on capturing member needs. And so they're constantly sending out questions to get a better feel for what it is you need right now. You being an individual, not you being the 42% that like, that's my pie chart right there. The 42% that like the certifications. All right. So yeah, I could do all kinds of charts with my arms. So the lapsed member renewals and lapsed member engagement is another great one. So it's stunning to me how many associations get a huge lift in the renewals and lapsed members when lapsed member win back, when they simply ask the question and which leads to the action, conversational engagement around the question is, did you know your membership lapsed? Unbelievable. It's like the average in the average association, it's like 53%. And from what we've seen with our clients, like 53% of people didn't even know their membership expired months after it expired, right? You've already sent like a dozen emails telling them they're not seeing them. They're missing them. It's noise now. And I've seen some as bad as like 80, 85%. Some associations we all know very, very well, right up around 80, 85%. All right. So lapsed members. Now, another use case, advocacy, member stories. But the use case we're talking about today is conference engagement. There's really two subsets of conference engagement. There's conference registration. Now, that wasn't necessary for Amazon because they knew exactly who was coming. They didn't have a choice to register or not, I don't think. It's like, you're in, you're an employee, you're in. So really, for them, it wasn't about conference registration drive, meaning let's get more people to come to the conference. For them, it was about let's engage the people that are coming to the conference. Yep. And so the conference registration drive oftentimes is a quick little prompt like, hey, we have another conference coming up, lots of great topics. Which topic is of most interest to you? Based on that, however they answer, you show them like the sessions that are coming up. Like that's a great interaction that sparks the conversation that actually could continue on from there. An example of a conference, well, Mishka, you're going to show some examples, but conference engagement is more along the lines of finding out where people stand on certain issues or what's of interest to them. Where are they going to go? Are they going to go to that cocktail party on Friday night before the conference really begins? It's about trying to get a feel for where people are beforehand. And then when they're at the conference, this is something we haven't done yet, but I'm really excited to roll out SMS text messaging because at the conference, imagine a scenario where somebody shows up to the conference, they register. As soon as they register, pick up their badge, they get a text message from Mishka saying, hey, it's Mishka over here. Let me know if I can help. Let me know if there's anything you need. Let me know if you have any questions about your sessions or wherever they're at. Now that's automated, but when somebody responds back, ding, a handful of people on staff get that message and they can respond back to that person one-to-one. So that's the way a lot of hotels are doing interaction with guests when they show up. So now that could happen at the conference if it's an in-person conference. In this scenario, we didn't do that because it's a virtual conference. But then post-conference, what were your takeaways? Was it valuable? Now, you could do that in a survey, but a survey is oftentimes way too long to begin with, right? But more importantly, the big difference between a survey and all of these examples is a survey is a way to dissect people. It's not a way to spark a conversation with people. When was the last time you answered a survey or gave a survey out where you actually expected the conversation to go beyond them answering the question? So anyway, that's the difference between conversational engagement. It actually is a two-way exchange as opposed to surveys, which is just a dissection. That was me dissecting. Dissection, there's got to be a chart, a graph for that one. Dissecting. Yeah, that's a little grosser for some reason. Dissecting your guests to the conference. And that is my spiel on conversational engagement, but more specifically the use case around conference engagement. And then, so Mishka, are you going to talk to us about what happened at Amazon, or Tim, do you want to keep talking?
No, no. I want to just make sure we get the backstory here because I thought it was a bit of really smart use of PropFuel, but it was also, there was a little bit of serendipity involved, right? Like we had somebody.
Yes, Tim, you are very smart and you used PropFuel really, really well. Good.
And I had to work serendipity in there just because it was one of those words that you needed to get in. But there was some timing, right? Like Mishka, like you actually did a little bit more understanding of how PropFuel worked, and it happened to be coincident with Amazon, and it sort of came together that this might be a really good opportunity to actually use PropFuel.
Yeah, so it actually came about when I was handed the event design potential of Amazon, being told they're looking for community engagement, they're looking for their talent acquisition team essentially to meet each other, connect with each other. And that's the top priority, right? They have content, but what they really want to see is connection among their attendees. And the reason why I was looped into this is because I've been involved in a lot of internal Matchbox community engagement events and retreats and show and tells and things like that. So I was pulled into this, and being the chef that I am, I was asked to put together, what do we call it, a full course meal, because this would be a full day or half day event with multiple sessions. And so I'm sitting down looking at, drink, appetizer, entree, dessert, etc. I've certainly missed something along the way. But what I was really looking at was the appetizer.
I think you missed a cocktail. Was there a cocktail in there?
I said drink. I think that's slightly more inclusive, perhaps. But I was really thinking about that appetizer piece. And then also something that's been thrown around is the idea of a doggy bag, like after your meal. There's always something left over. You take it in a doggy bag, you put it in the fridge. Except the great thing about our doggy bags is that they don't go bad, right? You don't have to throw them away, you can keep them. So I'm thinking about this appetizer piece, doggy bag. How can we have an intro to this event that gets people excited to click in the morning on their little calendar invitation into our space before they enter it? I happen to be involved in a PropFuel campaign for a completely different Matchbox related project. And also I stumbled upon our collaboration recipe, Registrant Soup. And I thought that this would be a really neat tool for them, especially because they have 200 employees who are coming to this event. And all Matchbox events that I've ever been a part of organizing have been less than 100 people. So that was another thing to solve for. How do we make 200 people feel like each individual matters and each individual is excited to attend this event? So PropFuel was clearly to me the answer to that for both introing into the event and then also checking in after the event. What did you take away from this? Not only so that we can know what they took away from this, what we can use in the future, but also so that we can remind them what they learned, because so often we attend these events, we take all these notes, and then they stay in a drawer and we never open them to look at them again. We always say, oh yeah, that would be nice if I can incorporate that later or do this thing or implement that. And then you don't do it because it falls off the radar, other priorities. So part of that doggy bag piece is making sure that these ideas aren't forgotten. And then also establishing continuity into the next event. So shall we dive into some of the data, the questions we asked? All right, data, baby. Let's get down to business. So our pre-event question, we asked what participants were most excited to partake in for Team Day. That was the name of the event, was Team Day. Amazon had come up with these three main pillars: celebrate, innovate, and include. And then also we were incorporating a debate, which I was really interested to see interest. So, fight to the death debate. So we have these four categories of the three main goals and then the debate. When each recipient clicked on any of the answers, they were linked directly to a landing page that was specific to that piece of the puzzle. So if someone clicked on celebrate, they were sent directly to the session description for a session that directly achieved that goal. So we're now funneling all these answers into pushing people to the things that they're most interested in to get them not only excited about the event, but excited about the specific piece of the event that is specific to them. So what we found was that, in fact, most people were most excited to convene to celebrate the team's accomplishments and connect with their colleagues, which Amazon knew, I think. When they came to us, that was their main goal. So great. This is great data for us to know. We know that we're on the right track in prioritizing the connectedness of the community over educational content, because that's what most people are here for. We also had people interested, 17% and 15% were interested in the content that we were presenting. One of the most spicy sessions was our debate on, we called it the Great Debate, on the ethics and morality of using artificial intelligence in the talent acquisition field. And so we wanted to use PropFuel to check in with where people stood before the debate and where people stood after the debate, because we wanted to measure, did we actually change minds in this session?
Hey, Mishka, can I jump in just for a second here? So a lot of what you're talking about here is very much like polling, right? Polling people beforehand. And it does, conversational engagement makes it super, super easy for people to engage by asking a question, write an email that they click on, right? But one of the huge components, or one of the big value of conversational engagement, is that exchange. So if they answered that they were worried or cautious about AI, that might lead to a much different interaction, maybe a blog post, maybe something to prepare them, or a video. And I can't remember the details of what we did in all of these questions, but based on how they answer, they're actually seeing a different, they have a different journey or different experience that is aligned to their answer. So I think that's an important note. There's a lot of cool measurement that you're getting out of being able to see the poll and the results and the before and the after stuff. But a big part about that conversation is that two-way exchange. You ask a question, they answer, and then you respond with something unique to them.
So let's dive in to debate questions. So we asked, is the practice of AI morally ethical? We sent a question prior to the event, before they had attended the debate. And then right after the event, I believe the following day, we asked, where do you stand after the debate? And then, did your stance change, and why? So that last question is really key to understanding really the influence that we had. Looking at the stats, looking at what people said, 70% said that they needed more background knowledge prior to the debate before they could create a stance, which was great, because then they were sent to a landing page that explained that the first portion of the session would be a talk with someone who's very experienced with AI, so that they could gather the background knowledge they need to pick a stance. So that's great. And then of the people who picked a stance, most believed yes, the practice is ethical. Some believed no. Now, when we move to after the debate, we can see clearly that that huge 70% has now shrunken down. We've forced people to pick a side. They've gotten the background knowledge they needed. So great. The content that we presented in this session made an impact because it allowed people to pick a side. Still, we have more for yes than no. And then we have almost half are undecided. And we'll see why a little later on when we look at the qualitative data, so the written responses.
Or the voice of the member, right? In terms of, for associations, that's what we hear about. You know, that's the phrase we're hearing more, is like the voice of the member. What are they saying? Let's listen to them. But listening to our constituents, in this case, their employees, is not baked into us. Right? We're so used to broadcasting stuff. Actually listening to what they say is less common. So yeah, it's pretty cool that they did that here.
And it's really exciting to see the answers roll in, right? Because you have the excitement of this event, and then you send out this question, did your stance change? Why did it change? And you're scrolling through the answers like, oh, okay, this person thought that. It's exciting on the other end of it too. So when we asked, did your stance change? We see that 44% said yes, their stance changed. In my opinion, that's huge. Maybe I'm just stubborn as someone who typically leaves the debate with the same opinion that I had going in. But to me, that shows that we had like a direct, measurable influence on almost half of the people who answered this question. And I mean, I guess more broadly, I suppose the people who attended this session, but to be more specific, the people who answered this question. But what we really wanted to know is why. The voice of the member, the voice of the employee. Why did your stance change? What about the session changed your mind? So this is where we distinguish between your qualitative data and your quantitative data. So qualitative being text responses, quantitative being the numbers, the pie charts, the percentages. So we've looked at the numbers. Now we want to see what people said, why they chose what they chose. So when we asked, why did you choose your stance, or why do you have the stance that you have? These 4 answers were, I think, really what summed up what most people said. The first said, it is not a matter of being ethical or not. It's all about how you choose to use it. Similarly, humans behind AI drive its reasoning. Similarly, just as ethical as humans with their unconscious bias. Practice is morally ethical if human intervention can take place, which is interesting because now we're talking about human intervention, and one of the main of this panel is like human interaction. So that's kind of funny. But all of these answers largely say the same, but what you wouldn't know is that one of them actually decided that AI was not ethical, and the other 3 said that it was ethical, but they all kind of had the same thought and the same reasoning behind it. And we never would have known that if we hadn't asked the question, asked for the reasoning for the text response. So that was really pivotal in not only seeing that we influenced what people felt about this topic, but also how we influenced how people thought about this topic. And it was really neat to watch play out. And I would 100% recommend doing this for any sort of, first of all, produce a debate with your community. It's spicy, it's fun, it's unexpected, and you can create amazing hype for it. And then also ask these questions because it's really interesting to see sort of from high up on a larger scale.
Can I jump in, Mishka, before you switch off of that? So one, we've got a recipe if you, after this, go looking in the kitchen for the great debate. But I think this goes to what Dave was saying about the value of the voice of the member or the voice of the teammate or sort of however you wanted to phrase that, because just doing a quantitative poll, we might have made very different inferences about the reasoning behind the numbers, right? Just looking at the percentages of things, we might have made one set of inferences. What I thought was really fascinating about this one was doing the listening. It was that people chose undecided to also represent for it depends, for it's complicated, for there isn't really an easy answer. And where I see the value of something like that being able to apply out from this sort of more broadly is that you would have chosen to act on the numerical data maybe one way, right? Like, I'm just going to provide more information. But that wouldn't have actually sort of gotten to the result that you wanted, which was making people choose, right? People are actually just sort of very determinately in this it depends space, and probably what they need, because you've done the listening, because you've sort of seen the actual responses, is you've learned that they just feel like it's complex. It's not that there's one set of information that's going to make them decide one way or the other. They may have a more nuanced view, and then your response is now going to need to be more nuanced. So actually investing in listening, in sort of coming up with good questions and really paying attention to the qualitative answers means that you're going to have a more effective, impactful set of response options than you might otherwise have had. And using some of what Dave was talking about with the conversational pathways that you have in PropFuel, it gives you some really interesting ways to continue that conversational engagement depending on, I've gotten these responses, maybe I can build some more really interesting campaigns, conversations that sort of say, hey, you said that it depends. Does it depend on this, this, or this? And then maybe a couple of more questions that go down the path. So being able to use the voice of the member to inform sort of further conversation just seems like a really interesting application, and I think highlights very strongly the need to listen to the voice and not just the numbers.
Can I add something to that as well? Tim, you touched on this a little bit, but the automation only goes so far, and the automation is all human created, right? And there's some human interaction, but where actual humans now step in and connect with the individual is based on somebody's comment you can expand, continue the conversation to continue to learn about their perspective. So let's apply this to associations. Let's suppose you're working on an advocacy program and you want to get some real stories about how the association has helped you become a better nurse, or has helped your members become a better nurse or a doctor or a better accountant or a better a dog trainer or whatever. There I go with the dogs again. But the idea of being able to continue the conversation one-on-one with somebody to me is just awesome. Like, that's truly conversational engagement. You have 20,000 members. How do you know who to talk to, when to talk to them, and what to talk to them about? And it starts with these kind of big scale type questions and interactions, to the point we can drill down to the 20, 30, 60 people that you actually want to continue this conversation with. It's awesome. It's a really, really cool approach that I think is hitting all kinds of industries right now, from hotels to the association world right now, and being able to interact with individuals through conversation at scale.
And also, when you incorporate these responses or these thoughts into what you do next, it shows your members or your employees or your attendees that you're actually listening. So not only are you listening, but they can see that you're listening, and they actually do want to answer these questions because they know you're listening. When you fill out a survey after an event, what would you improve about this event? You send it off into the ether. You never see it again. You don't know who's looking at it, if they've looked at it, when they looked at it, and what they're going to do with it. If you show your audience how you're using this information, then they know that you're listening, and they want to have those conversations in the future, which actually leads really beautifully into perpetuating an open line. Post-event.
Real quick though, Mishka, I had a funny moment there, because I'm thinking about that example that Dave came up with at the beginning, where somebody walks into the association and has the "I'm a new member" sign on their chest. And you ask them, "Hey, what is it you want from your time with us?
What do you want from me?
What do you want from me?" And then they answer you. And then in that example, what we were just talking about is you then stand there for 10 minutes looking at them silently.
Yeah, that's great.
Right. And so of course it's going to be awkward. They're going to be confused. They're not going to really want to continue to engage because they just said something into nothing. So the more sort of immediate call and response piece here starts to train people into the sense of comfort with the dialogue and with the ongoing conversation, versus the really heavy survey that they answer once a year, and they have no idea whether or not what they said landed anywhere, meant anything, had any cause and effect at all. So just even tying it back to that original example, Dave, just one, makes me smile, and two, I think is kind of illustrative of the point you're getting at.
What a great video that would make. If I had any idea how to make advertisements or videos, that'd make a great video of somebody asking a question, another person responding, another person just standing there blankly for 3 minutes. Yeah, not the way humans interact, is it?
Perpetuating an open line. So post-event communications. This is the doggy bag that I had mentioned earlier. Creating continuity from this event into your everyday, in Amazon's purpose, your everyday work life, and then also into their next event, because this was not going to be the last of their community engagement or employee engagement events. So it was really important to us that we checked in with what the takeaways were, what impacted them the most, and what they want to see the most moving forward. So we asked, of the topics that we touched upon on Team Day, which are you most eager to continue discussing moving forward? And we gave 4 different options, which would again be these sort of funnels to give us a look into what should we be prioritizing for the next event, and also how might this have differed from how they answered before they came into Team Day to begin with. So clearly we can see that it's pretty split between two different subtopics. One is well-being, psychological safety, and resilience. the other being the future of recruitment and innovation. So now we know clearly that these are two topics or two categories that we would want to focus on designing around for the next event. This is what people typically want to see. And then you have a couple outliers, and we can't forget about them. What's great about sending these email campaigns through PropFuel is that we can see who sent each response. So perhaps you have a smaller scale session that is geared towards one of those smaller categories, to show those people who pick the smaller categories that they're not just a statistic. We still want to produce events that they want to see. And then you target those people. You told us in this question that you wanted to see inclusion and collective intelligence moving forward. So we have a session coming up on blank that appeals to that. So this can be really significant in making your members or your employees or attendees feel like you're really seeing them, feel like you're listening. And then you're also giving them what they want because you asked, right? What better way to know what your community wants to see than to ask them? Hold conversations with your audience and design accordingly. Ask questions, really hear those responses, and design your events or your sessions or meetings, gatherings according to what they want to see.
So the piece that I kind of wanted to reinforce for Matchbox was Amazon's primary goal in holding this team day was to explore some of those other interesting topics like inclusiveness and innovation and celebration, but really it was all in service to one sort of core outcome, which was everybody feeling more connected at the end of the event. And that made all of our choices about who was speaking to each of those topics, the way that we framed those topics, the conversations that we facilitated around those topics, all had to have some element of building and fostering that sense of connection in the team. And when somebody like Amazon came to us and said, we want 200 people who do the same job, but do it in different countries, for different areas of our organization at different levels of the organization. Some of them may know each other really well. Some of them may never have met before. That we then went out and found the partners and the tools that we thought would best support an event design that accomplished that goal of building that sense of connection. And that included folks like CNET, which is all about collaborative storytelling and getting those teammates to sort of send in stories about why they're part of the team or how that being on the team has affected them. Circles, which builds that sort of small, intentional community space for conversations to continue on, and PropFuel, right, which helps each one of those folks contribute to the conversation before, during, and after. And one of the things that Amazon really felt was important to understand was that one day out of the year isn't going to build the connection. It's a sort of a stone soup pot that you can use to sort of build a bigger, if we're going to stick with the recipe analogy, the kitchen analogy, that it's the pot that you use to sort of mix in a much sort of broader connectedness initiative, right? Which is all about, even before the event, getting together to meet each other and sort of have small group discussions about what are we expecting to find when we all gathering on the day of, using PropFuel to help them sort of get their minds around it. And now knowing afterwards what is going to make everybody the most excited to come back together and continue connecting with each other. Now we know, right? We've got some really strong ingredients to mix together for the 3, 4, 5, 6 ongoing sessions they have afterwards to cement this piece of connectedness. So that was their goal. We designed an experience around it, and we reached out to partners specifically like PropFuel for helping us get there. And I think that says a lot about what you guys do, Dave, that we were like, oh, that's who we need to talk to help make this happen.
Thanks, Tim and Mishka. I think what we talked about today was a lot about, because of the use case that we're discussing, which is conference engagement. A lot of what we talked about is insight, right? And like understanding, gaining better understanding with a two-way exchange. But conversational engagement generally is measured by its output. And the output from conversational engagement, because of better understanding, because of better needs, because of the ease of actually polling somebody and participating in a conversation, the output is getting people to do things. And you get people to do things through conversation. That's how you get people to actually interact with you and do something. It's a much different experience to ask a question like, did you know your membership expired? Or are you planning to renew your membership? Yes or no? Really simple question, right? Way more effective. Like twice as effective. An A/B test, twice as effective to ask somebody, are you planning to renew your membership? Than just to send them a note that says your membership is expired, renew here. Same thing, right? What's the difference? In one case they can renew. In another case, we're just like asking them, are you planning to renew? Conceptually, it's kind of the same thing. But in one scenario, it's this human way of engaging somebody in a conversation. It creates this two-way exchange. And for whatever reason, it works. It engages them better, twice as better that way. So anyway, that's the output. And it's harder to see that, I think, in this use case with conference engagement, because a lot of what we're getting out of this conference engagement is the measuring where people are before, during, and after. But anyway, I think that's a relevant point that I wanted to make around the bigger picture of what conversational engagement is.
So something I'm actually really curious what your thinking is here, Dave. But one of the things that I actually really like about PropFuel is not just the conversational sort of tool itself and sort of what it generates, but the intentionality it requires from me beforehand to think about how the conversation could go, where I want things to end up, to actually imagine what my member journey might be, because I have to put that thinking into it to actually create the journey beforehand. Like so many surveys that I've seen are just sort of a list of questions that I want to know that are kind of completely independent of necessarily the member experience. But in order to create any sort of if you answer this, then you get this response and it leads to this outcome, requires me to be more intentional up front. And probably leads to better outcomes because I'm actually thinking ahead to the intentionality of where I want to go. And then because I've done that, if somebody does something interesting and different that's accidental, because that surprises me, I now know to pay attention to it, right? So it's that combination for me of I had to be intentional in thinking about it. And if there's a really cool accident, it's more interesting to me because it makes itself more apparent to me. That is part of what makes me excited about the process of using PropFuel and not just the opportunity to use the tool itself.
That's a super cool perspective that I haven't thought about before. The thought of being deliberate or more intentional about what exactly you're talking about, rather than saying, "Hell, I want to sell tickets to my conference." Thinking about what is more meaningful to the member. Where is the value of this conference for the member? Giving that a little more thought by figuring out what can you ask them to figure out what that is. Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. So one of the things that I am always telling our clients to do, because they're along those lines, Tim, they're always like, well, so what do we ask? And I always tell them the same thing, which is, well, if this person were to walk in your office, like literally imagine yourself having a conversation. If somebody were to walk in your office with a sign that says, I'm a new member, or my membership is expired, or I'm debating whether or not I should attend your conference, like somebody's wearing a sign that puts them in this segment, right? Well, what would you say to them if they walked up to you and said, hey, right? So like whatever you would say to them is probably going to lead you down that conversation. All right. So it's, I love that perspective. It does get you thinking about what's the best way to draw this person into the conversation.
Mishka, you looked like you were about to jump in before I cut you off. So why don't we start with you?
Well, I was going to do a little funky outro because I thought you might want me to.
Oh, even better. Yeah. Unless I don't have anything else other than to say this is a lot of fun and come back for the next time when we all get together. But I think a funky outro sounds great. Dave, do you have anything else you want to throw in before we get the funky outro? Because I don't think we want to keep talking after that. It'll be a hard act to follow.
No. Well, I'll keep talking if someone asks me to keep talking, but I better not. I shouldn't. I'll stop.
All right, Mishka, over to you. Take us out.
Thank you all so much for attending. Definitely consider how you might be able to spark meaningful conversation with your community, how you may be able to incorporate that in what you do in the future. Be sure to check out our respective Matchbox and PropFuel tiles in this event space and peruse the kitchen. There are tons of great ideas there. Check out our collaboration recipe. And we hope to see you soon.